Imagine this for a second. What if what you see isn't always, exactly what's there?
Hmm.
What if your brain, without you even realizing it, is constantly, sort of crafting the reality you perceive?
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? And it's not just hypothetical. It's pretty fundamental to how our visual system actually functions. Our brains are incredibly active participants.
Right. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at some great source material excerpts from the art and science of perception, and a really interesting piece asking, why is op art considered art?
Yeah, good stuff.
So our mission basically is to explore this amazing connection between your visual system, your mind, and, the art that deliberately plays with both. Think of this as a shortcut to understanding the surprising ways your eyes can be tricked and how artists have brilliantly turned those tricks, I guess, into a whole new kind of experience.
We'll kick things off by looking at several classic optical illusions. Each one kind of peels back the curtain on how your brain actively builds what you see. It's not just passively taking in data.
Hmm.
Then we'll shift gears a bit and look at how artists, especially in the op art movement, really grabbed hold of these principles intentionally to create some uh, truly captivating works.
So you'll get to see how art isn't just about what's sitting there on the canvas, but what incredible things are happening right inside your own head as you look at it. Okay, let's get into it. So the starting point is this idea. Your brain isn't just like a camera passively recording. No, it's actively constructing reality. It's interpreting, predicting, filling in gaps, all based on past experience.
That's exactly it. And that's why optical illusions are, well, so revealing. They expose this hidden process, don't they? They show us that what we perceive is often this complex interpretation, not just a straight reflection of the world out there.
Okay, let's jump into the first example then. This one's called the wall illusion. You look at this image, it's got two red lines drawn on what looks like walls. Pretty much everyone sees one line as shorter.
Right. But here's the kicker. They're both exactly the same length.
No way. How does that work?
It's amazing, really. It shows how your mind is basically directing your eyes. Your brain sees this flat picture, but it interprets it as a real 3D scene, and it automatically applies rules of perspective it knows.
Like things further away look smaller.
Precisely. So it knows a distant wall should look taller overall, even if parts of it are further away. To keep things consistent with that expectation, your brain essentially adjusts your perception of the lines. It makes the one that seems closer appear shorter to fit the 3D model it's building.
Wow. So it's actively editing the picture based on assumptions.
It is. It's a fantastic demonstration of how our knowledge shapes what we see, sometimes even overriding the raw visual data hitting our eyes.
That's genuinely mind-boggling. Our brains are already working on the image before we even consciously register it. Okay, let's look at another one that shows the brain's predictive side, the Ochi illusion, named after Hajime Ochi, a Japanese graphic artist from 1977.
Yes.
You see this rectangular checker pattern, right? But the middle part is rotated 90 degrees. What happens when you look at that?
Well, when you hold it still, you might notice a subtle kind of shimmering or flickering in that central circular bit.
Okay.
But then if you slowly move the pattern, like back and forth, whoa, the illusion of motion becomes much, much stronger. Lots of people say it looks like the middle part is moving on its own, or maybe like you're seeing it through a circular hole, almost like it's on a different layer.
Even though it's completely flat and static.
Exactly. Your brain is conjuring up depth and movement where there isn't any. It's like it's wrestling with conflicting visual cues and trying its best to make sense of them.
Fascinating. Do we know exactly why it does that?
Not completely. The full mechanism isn't totally pinned down, but the thinking is it probably interferes with the brain's usual ways of creating a stable picture, maybe through some visual blurring or just the sheer ambiguity of the pattern itself.
Yeah.
Interestingly, if you stare right at the center, the motion effect tends to lessen quite a bit.
Okay, next up, concentric circles or interwoven lines. This one looks at first glance like these really intricate interwoven bands, almost like Celtic knotwork.
Yeah, it does have that feel. But what's remarkable is that those circles you perceive, they sort of emerge spontaneously. It happens because of these fundamental rules your brain uses to organize what it sees.
Rules? Like what?
They're often called Gestalt principles, things like the law of good continuity. Your mind wants to see smooth, continuous patterns, and the law of proximity, meaning it groups things together that are close to each other. Your brain is essentially trying to impose order, find coherent patterns, even in data that might seem a bit jumbled.
So it's like our brains are automatically connecting the dots, even if the lines aren't actually drawn.
Pretty much. In this specific illusion, the little squares in the different rings are tilted in opposite ways, which creates a kind of contradictory pull for continuity. And the alternating black and white colors, that's crucial too. If they were all the same color, proximity would probably win out and you'd likely just see plain concentric circles.
And here's something really odd about this one. The source mentions it works best when you're not laser focused on it.
That's right. It often seems strongest when you're just casually looking. If you really stare hard and try to analyze every detail, the illusion can actually diminish or even disappear entirely.
That's weird, isn't it? What does that tell us?
Well, it raises some really interesting questions about conscious awareness and perception. It suggests our brain is doing this fundamental organizing work before our conscious mind fully clicks in or notices the result. The fact that this underlying structure, which isn't really continuous circles, can still create such a strong conscious perception, it really challenges how we think about attention. Is attention part of perception or something that comes after?
Okay, building on that idea, let's look at concentric circles or spirals. Now, in this one, the squares are all tilted in the same direction across the rings.
Right, so here, every square kind of points towards the nearest circle boundary at a consistent angle. This creates a really strong connection, again, thanks to those Gestalt laws of continuity and proximity, and the result, you get this powerful, almost undeniable impression of a spiral.
Even though it's actually just concentric circles again.
Exactly. The perception directly contradicts the underlying structure. It's purely a creation of your brain organizing those tilted squares.
And like the last one, does this spiral also fade if you focus too hard?
Yes, it often does. It's almost like our brain's automatic pattern-finding system is so strong it overrides the reality, at least until we consciously step in and try to deconstruct the image piece by piece.
It makes you think of those M.C. Escher drawings, doesn't it? Like the impossible staircases.
That's a great comparison. Escher's work often seems perfectly logical at first glance, but when you really try to follow a path, trace the structure, you realize it just can't exist in our normal 3D world.
So becoming aware isn't just about what your eyes see. It's a deeper mental function. Just perceiving something isn't the same as really understanding it.
Exactly. It reminds me of that old riddle, If a plane crashes right on the Canada-US border, where do you bury the survivors?
Ah, right. You process it quickly, assume it makes sense.
Until you stop and pay attention to the word survivors. You don't bury survivors. It's the same kind of thing. Quick perception versus careful analysis.
Okay, let's shift to the wavering squares, sometimes called the checkerboard illusion. You look at this checkerboard, and the lines, they definitely look like they're undulating or wavering.
They really do, but trust us, they are perfectly straight horizontal and vertical lines.
So what's the trick here? Why do they look wavy?
Well, the precise why is still debated, but one leading idea involves how our brain deals with light transitions between bright and dark areas. For example, a white square on a black background can actually appear a tiny bit larger than a black square on a white background.
Right.
In this illusion, the theory goes something like this. The visual influence or illumination from the tiny white squares near the corners of the black squares can sort of interfere with or cancel out the influence of the larger white squares where they meet. This creates a subtle distortion, a kind of bulging effect along the boundary lines, making them appear to waver.
So it's these tiny little details at the intersections causing this big visual effect.
That seems to be the key. The illusion is thought to arise from the interplay of these subtle connections, especially those little branching white squares.
Got it. Next, the scintillating grid. This one's related to the Hermann grid illusion, right?
Yes, it is. What happens here is, as your eyes move across the pattern, a grid of, say, red lines with white circles at the intersections on a black background, you start seeing these ephemeral black dots popping up and disappearing inside the white circles.
I see them. They flicker in and out.
And you'll probably notice the effect gets much stronger when your eyes are moving around, right? But if you stare fixedly at one single intersection...
Yeah, the dot there mostly disappears, or at least fades a lot.
Exactly. That strongly suggests it's about the interaction between your central vision, where you're focusing, and your peripheral vision. This particular grid was discovered relatively recently in 1994 by Elke Lingelbach. And like some others, a full explanation is still, well, a bit complex and not totally nailed down. Viewing distance can also change how strong it feels.
Okay, this next one sounds really complex. Illusions within a single image. What are we looking at here?
So you see what looks like a translucent blue circle in the middle. Then there's a larger blue ring that seems to be behind it, and there are white lines that appear to pass behind the central disk, but in front of the outer ring, all on a black background. It really looks layered, doesn't it?
Definitely. Like different planes.
But here's the crucial point. It's not. It's all just flat colored shapes printed on the surface. There are no actual layers or transparency.
Okay. So what's the illusion then?
The main illusion is that the inner blue circle looks noticeably darker than the outer blue ring.
Ah, yeah, it does. Significantly darker.
But if you were to cover up those black and white striped borders that surround them, you'd find out that both blue areas are actually the exact same shade of blue.
Seriously? The exact same blue? That seems impossible. How?
It's really counterintuitive, isn't it? Again, the precise neural stuff is complex, but what this powerfully shows is that our brain doesn't just register color in isolation. It's constantly making calculations about light, shadow, perceived depth, transparency, all based on the context, the stuff around the color.
So the surrounding stripes are tricking the brain about the blue itself.
That seems to be the key. The context dramatically changes our perception of brightness and color. Traditional explanations about simple contrast don't quite work here either, which makes it even more puzzling and interesting for researchers. It shows our perception of even basic things like brightness isn't just about the light hitting the eye, but how the brain interprets that light based on the perceived scene structure.
Man, it really makes you second guess what you're seeing. Okay, final one for this section. The sienna pavement illusion, also called steps, boxes, or bricks. This sounds like an old one.
It is, in a way. It's a more complex version of an illusion pattern that actually appears in the marble floor of Siena Cathedral dating back to the late Middle Ages.
Okay, so what do we see?
This image is fascinating because it supports multiple different interpretations, but you can only really hold one in your mind consciously at any given time. You might see it as a stack of boxes going down diagonally white tops, red and black sides.
Yeah.
Or you might suddenly see it as boxes with white bottoms hanging from above, viewed from underneath.
Whoa. Okay, yeah, I just flipped to that. That's wild. The source says you can isolate part of it with paper.
That's a great tip. If you cover up parts to create just two horizontal rows running across the white diamond shapes, you basically get the classic sawtooth illusion from the Siena pavement itself.
And even that simpler version can be seen in different ways.
Right. You might see it as just a decorative row of raised three-colored shapes. Or you could interpret it as architectural forms, like right-angled bricks in red, black, and white, seen from below.
And rotating it changes things too.
Massively. If you rotate the whole image 90 degrees, the interpretation totally shifts. It often becomes a kind of zigzag pattern projecting upwards at an angle.
So what's the underlying reason for all this shape-shifting?
It's a brilliant example of something called the horizontal plane assumption. Our visual system is deeply conditioned by our experience with the world. Floors are horizontal, walls are vertical, ceilings are horizontal above us. So when faced with an ambiguous pattern like this, our brain tries to fit it into one of these familiar orientations.
It's trying to make it look like something recognizable, like steps or boxes.
Exactly. It assumes things are arranged on these standard planes. When you rotate the image, you break those assumptions, you disrupt the usual cues, and the brain might latch onto a completely different interpretation. It's deeply rooted in how we've learned to navigate the physical world. Our brains are constantly trying to find familiar structures.
It's just incredible how much our brain is doing behind the scenes, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actively building what we see, making assumptions, filling things in, often way beyond what's physically there.
It really is. Our minds use past experience constantly, even for simple lines and colors.
But then what happens when artists take these very quirks, these features of perception, and intentionally use them? That brings us squarely into the world of op art.
Exactly. We've just seen how our brains naturally create or fall for illusions. Op art is basically a whole movement where artists said, okay, let's deliberately trigger those same visual mechanisms.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, the question comes up, why is this stuff considered art? You know, it doesn't always look like a traditional painting or sculpture.
That's a fair question. But first off, it absolutely creates a powerful aesthetic experience. And creating that kind of experience is, well, one of the most fundamental jobs of art, isn't it?
Good point.
Art, short for optical art, of course, really took off in the 1960s. Artists like Bridget Riley, Victor Visserli, they were the pioneers. Their main goal was to create illusions of movement, of vibration, depth, using the eye's own perceptual system. It's meant to be a direct visual interaction, way more than just a pretty pattern.
So it's not passive decoration, it's actively engaging your eyes and brain, making you part of the experience.
Precisely. It works using things like retinal after images, when you look away from a bright light, or
Hmm.
the moire effect, figure ground tricks. These things cause immediate reactions in the viewer: surprise, curiosity, maybe even a bit of visual unease, or maybe pleasure. And from an art philosophy perspective, creating that aesthetic experience is a core function of art. So op art fits right in.
And it's also really about the artist skillfully guiding how we see, right? Controlling our perception.
Absolutely. Vazarely wrote about this quite a bit. Op artists take their understanding of how we see things like microsaccades, those tiny little involuntary eye jitters we all have.
You know about those.
Yeah, they're constant. Or how our brain deals with illusions, ambiguity. They turn that knowledge into art. It makes perception itself feel like a kind of game. It makes you very aware of how your own brain is processing things.
So it moves beyond just being an object on the wall. It creates a relationship with the person looking at it.
That's a perfect way to put it. Philosophers like Merleau-Ponty, Dewey, Eco talked about this idea: are art creating a relationship? An op art piece literally changes depending on how you look at it, where your gaze falls. It's interactive. You don't just watch it, you actively experience it.
And that experience, because it's often contradictory or surprising, it can lead to deeper thoughts,
Yeah.
right? Almost philosophical questions about reality itself.
It really can. It definitely has that epistemological dimension, as you said. It goes beyond just looking cool. It makes you ask things like, does what I see actually exist like that? How reliable is my vision really? What does it mean that my brain fills in the blanks? It builds this fascinating bridge between art and philosophy.
And we can see this directly in the work of artists like Riley and Vazarely.
Oh, absolutely. Their art is just undeniable proof of how the brain can be, well, delighted and maybe even tricked. Bridget Riley's black and white works are famous for creating these intense feelings of vibration or waves.
Yeah, they almost seem to move.
And that's often triggered by the micro movements of your own eye muscles scanning those dense lines. Then you have Vazarely, who is a master of using geometric patterns to create stunning illusions of depth or distortion. Think of his Zebra series, or the Vega paintings. They make flat canvases look like they're bulging out or sinking in, like 3D domes.
Now, I have heard people say that because op-ed art relies so much on geometry and patterns, it can feel a bit, I don't know, mechanical, maybe lacking that artistic spark.
Yeah, that's a criticism you hear sometimes, but I think it misses the mark. Yes, geometric precision, patterns, symmetry, even things like fractals, they're definitely the toolkit. But behind that toolkit is enormous aesthetic intelligence. There's compositional mastery and this deep understanding of how to guide perception. Making those effects work, making them feel right, requires really deliberate creative choices. It's not just math.
So it's like visual engineering, maybe, but with an artist's sensibility.
Exactly. Think about selecting the patterns that involves math, sure, but also color theory, light, shadow, visual psychology, like how negative space flips with positive space. Designing the rhythm, like in music, isn't just repetition. It's about variations, speed-ups, slowdowns. Playing with symmetry and then deliberately breaking it, that takes real compositional skill. And the illusion techniques themselves, that's an art form based on predicting how your psychology will react. It's about challenging the brain, not just pleasing the eye.
So it's definitely not just visual candy, it's engaging the mind too. It's a mental art.
That's a term people use. Also conceptual design or perceptual engineering, because the process of making it involves so much reasoning, planning, experimenting. Vazarely even used computer algorithms later on. It's a result of serious cognitive work, not just intuition.
And historically, it popped up during a really dynamic time in art, didn't it? The 50s and 60s.
Absolutely. It emerged in the late 50s, really hit its stride in the early 60s. It was happening alongside minimalism, kinetic art, hard-edge painting, pop art, a really vibrant period. Op art carved out its own niche by focusing so intensely on perception and the viewer's role. And quick distinction, it's often confused with kinetic art, but kinetic art involves actual physical movement. Op art is all about perceived movement from static images.
And it was also quite different from what came just before it, abstract expressionism.
That's very different. Abex, dominant in the 40s and 50s, was all about emotion, the artist's inner world, big expressive gestures. Op art came along and offered this, well, almost opposite approach. Anonymous, systematic, coolly rational, focused on perception. It was like saying, let's try perception instead of raw emotion, or structured lines instead of messy brushstrokes, are a real alternative.
And it got major recognition pretty quickly with that big MoMA show, The Responsive Eye, in 1965.
That was huge.
Uh,
William Seitz curated it, featuring Riley, Vizarly, Aga, Manuskovich, Cruz Diaz, all the key players. That show really put op art on the international map. Suddenly, it was everywhere. Fashion, advertising, graphic design. It exploded into popular culture.
So even if some critics back then maybe sniffed at it, calling it decorative or emotionless, its place in art history is pretty secure now.
Oh, definitely. Sure, it had its critics. Some felt it sold out by becoming popular, others found it too cold. But those critiques didn't really damage its legitimacy in the long run. Today, our historians see it as a really significant systematic movement within late modernism. It's valued as this artistic exploration of perception science, a truly avant-garde way of playing with our visual systems.
And maybe its most unique selling point and why we're talking about it is this direct connection between science and art.
You nailed it. That's probably its core strength. It's one of the few art movements that was so clearly driven by both scientific understanding and aesthetic goals. You look at the elements, geometry, math, repetition, theories from optical physics and psychology like Gestalt, edge detection, Moiré effects, contrast theories. They all have scientific roots. It directly uses how our eyes and brains work physiologically.
So it manages to have both artistic richness and scientific depth.
That sums it up perfectly. Vizarly himself said something like, art can bring science closer to the public through a new form of aesthetics. It really does merge artistic feeling with scientific precision. You could call it a kind of scientific aesthetics. This makes it a really early, strong example of what we now call STEAM, adding art to STEM. And you see its legacy today. Contemporary artists using technology and light, people like Lozano Hemmer, Olafur Eliasson, Refik Anadol, they often nod back to op and kinetic art. So yeah, it creates aesthetic feelings, builds an active bond with the viewer, demands creativity and technical skill, earned its place in history, and crucially, it bridges science and art.
Okay, great. Now let's tackle a question that inevitably comes up when you talk about illusions in art. M.C. Escher, where does he fit in? Is he op art or not?
It's a common connection people make, but the short answer is no, not technically. His work was incredibly influential, and it definitely shares some territory, but Escher isn't formally considered an op artist.
Okay, so if they both use illusions, what are the main differences?
Several things. First, the timing. Escher did his most famous work mainly from the 30s to the 70s. Op art really took off in the mid-60s, post-1964 especially. Also, Escher was very much an individual artist exploring his own unique path with math and paradox. Op art was more of a cohesive movement, with artists like Vizarly and Riley sharing certain goals and approaches.
And the style or focus was different too.
Yeah. Escher's approach was rooted in mathematical perspective, tessellations, visual paradoxes, impossible loops. Op art focused more on abstract geometric patterns designed to create purely optical effects, vibration, moire, depth illusions.
What about the content, what they were actually depicting?
Escher often drew recognizable things, even if they were impossible. Buildings, creatures, landscapes, exploring ideas like infinity, reflection, cycles. His goal seemed to be partly about expanding the mind, turning math into visible art. Op art, on the other hand, was almost entirely abstract. It was focused purely on visual deception, optical tricks, the goal being to challenge vision itself through perceptual games.
So maybe the key thing is, Escher's work often has a narrative element, or explores a concept, right? Whereas op art is purely about the direct visual sensation.
That's a really good way to put it. Escher often tells a visual story or investigates an idea. Op art is all about the immediate, non-storytelling experience happening in your eyes and brain.
That makes sense.
And while both definitely use geometry, Escher was obsessed with symmetry and tiling. Op art's abstract nature just looks different from Escher's figurative, even if highly structured, images. It's also telling that the big MoMA show, The Responsive Eye, the one that basically launched op art, Escher wasn't in it. Academics and writers like Martin Gardner tend to classify Escher more as mathematical art or visual logic.
Right. So bottom line, Escher, massive inspiration, amazing artist dealing with visual paradox and math, but not actually part of the op art movement as such.
Exactly. His focus was different: math, symmetry, paradox, infinity, often within figurative scenes. Op art was about abstract patterns triggering direct perceptual effects.
Wow, what an incredible journey through perception this has been. We've really seen today how seeing isn't just passive recording, it's this active, sometimes really surprising construction happening in our minds.
It really is.
And then seeing how artists, especially in op art, created this amazing bridge to science by deliberately playing with those very mechanisms.
Mhm.
It's fascinating.
It truly underscores how dynamic and interpretive our whole visual world is.
So for you listening, here's a final thought to chew on. If your brain is constantly completing information, making assumptions based on experience, applying these hidden rules, what else might you be seeing in your everyday life that isn't quite, well, objectively there? How might knowing this change how you look at things, how you interpret information, maybe even how you react to the world around you?
Something definitely worth pondering.